Hey everyone, welcome to 2024, the first episode of the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast of the year. With me is Ryan, and what better way to start 2024, Ryan, than to talk about the awards that the Utah Film Critics Association voted and awarded yesterday for the films of 2023.
Sure, yeah.
Recap. Right, well, yes.
Well, some of those movies haven't come out yet either, so
that that is sad. And we'll talk about a lot of them. Let's give the big the general numbers going in first, which is Oppenheimer had 10 nominations. Poor Things had 9, and then Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Barbie all had 7 nominations. And I say that because some of those words are going to appear more than others, and some words are going to appear that I didn't just say.
Yes.
So let's talk about let's start with the easy stuff first. We started because we had 18 categories because we created a category, which it was my answer to a question that we had. So I'm not poo-pooing that category at all. But let's talk about some of them. Best used to be called best foreign language or best foreign film. Now it's best non-English feature. And we had one called Anatomy of a Fall.
Yes.
Godzilla -1. Everyone should have seen that by now. Society of the Snow, The Taste of Things, and The Zone of Interest. 5 very good movies.
Yeah.
And there was a spirited discussion. And there was because if you haven't heard of The Zone of Interest, it's about Nazis. So you automatically are going to have a very spirited discussion because you're talking about a movie about Nazis. And of course Godzilla, because you have best film and Godzilla in the same group of words, which automatically makes the conversation interesting. But again, these were all good films. The Taste of Things is a very art house movie. What you might think of more as a classical non-English feature when it comes to awards season, I think. Anatomy of a Fall is a French language film generally. Another good film. And Society of the Snow is the was it Uruguay?
Yeah, the rugby team
that crashed. Previously entered on film starring a lot of Hollywood people called Alive back in the day. So there was a lot of spirited discussion. And the eventual winner was The Zone of Interest, the Nazi movie, over, not by a lot, by Godzilla -1, which says a lot about Godzilla -1.
Sure.
But 2, what did you think? How do you feel about the winner? Like I said, these are 5 good movies.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm naturally curious about World War II era films, particularly those that deal with the society issues and culture and whatever. So sometimes I feel like So yes, I was totally fine with. I think Zone of Interest was one of my top 5 films of the year. But I do throw in the caveat of I'm naturally interested in a lot of those things simply because I've been to Germany a few times and really like the German people and have a really hard time making sense out of something that will never make sense.
Yeah,
basically. So no, I was totally fine. I think the one thing that's interesting about awards is that they aren't necessarily. You look at the winners and the lists, and they aren't necessarily. They don't tell the whole story, if that makes sense. I mean, because there's a lot of love for for a lot of films that didn't win in this category. I think everyone pretty much acknowledged the fact that they would have been happy with just about any of the winning.
Yeah. Said I made a passionate plea for Godzilla -1, just based on the fact that it's so good that it's even in the conversation for best anything that's not best kaiju movie. But no, Anatomy of a Fall Zone of Interest is great. But again, all of me, Anatomy of a Fall is was good. Society of the Snow was probably my least favorite because I felt like I'd seen it before. Because
sort of have, yeah.
Well, I felt like I knew a lot of the shots, not just the story. I felt like a lot of the shots were similar. I felt they addressed certain aspects of it differently, which was fine. But so for me, it was my least favorite of those five. But yeah, any of those five would have been great to have win, and it's the Zone of Interest, which if you can't see it yet, find it.
I think it's coming out, expanding in like a week or two.
But it's kind of a hard watch.
Well, yeah, but
it's not hard to understand or follow, but it's a hard watch.
It's hard in the sense that it's dealing with the Nazi philosophy from I won't say kind of from a non-judgmental sort of place.
Right.
It's just kind of showing you something, which is pretty provocative, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not the hardest Holocaust film to watch, because it's mostly about the people and not the actual
right
killing. But
yeah,
that's the killing's kind of the background thing.
Yeah, but no, so it's good. Next we had Best Animated Feature, which is always fun. This is my second year, but I always look at nominations and I'm always like, yeah, there's like two maybe three good films and then some filler.
Oh yeah, this year was great.
We had Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron. We had Nimona on Netflix. Robot Dreams, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. There's a shocker, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. We all had favorites. Everyone, I think, rolling in was just convinced as soon as this year started that Spider-Man was just going to run away with this. But again, surprisingly, strong category, lots of spirited discussion, especially about, and spoiler alert, we did let Spider-Man win. But the most spirited conversation in that room was probably about the runner-up, which is a film that probably no one has seen yet. Or it hasn't, because I don't think it doesn't have a U.S. distribution yet. It's called Robot Dreams.
It's Neon, so it will be coming out. But yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a strange thing in the sense I believe it's French. There's not really dialogue.
There is no dialogue.
The movie, so you really can't say. It does take place in New York, so is it New York?
Yeah, it feels like it. New York, or New Jersey. Well, Atlantic City kind of thing.
Yeah, Atlantic City is probably the more accurate. Anyway, but no, I think they. Well, and then I think we also should point out that list of those five films doesn't include one of the traditional powerhouses.
Illumination,
or really Pixar or Disney.
That's true. We do not have Wish. We do not have Migration. We do not have. Yeah, there's a lot of conspicuous absence.
So that I think is interesting, and also not a bad thing. I think that clearly some people need to kind of step up their game a little bit if they want to go back to being the favorites of I think it's been a few years. I mean, Pixar used to be you'd almost just put them as in the first or runner-up position. It was just going to happen.
Elemental. That was the other one.
Yeah, Elemental.
Elemental and this year, not there.
Not there. And I would argue they didn't deserve to be. So yeah. So it's but yes, I think what happened though too, and this is always kind of. Is there some people who discovered Robot Dreams and got really passionate about it and kind of made sure everyone else watched it, because there hasn't been a lot of conversation, or there's not a lot of buzz that's been going on for it, and I think we all Okay, let's see what's going on. And for me, it wasn't until the very last scene that I was willing to go, okay, yeah, this is a really, really interesting movie.
Yeah,
But once I thought it was good, a little weird, and heaven knows I like something that's a little weird.
it
Um,
is.
uh, but it was a wonderful exploration of relationships and timing and whatnot. So, but yeah, I think that's interesting because I don't know that a lot of people have even heard of it. But it's definitely something I think that people should see, and I think a lot of people will initially look at the animation style and be a little
Yeah,
put off.
it feels very retro,
Yeah,
but
it
a lot of European animation feels that way.
and it's pretty simplistic.
Yeah,
Yeah, but that's not
that's not a
that
knock
doesn't
on its quality
no,
at all.
and it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be if you don't
Yeah,
make a. I mean, actually, ultimately, is your movie any good? And this one, yes, this movie
yeah,
is fantastic. So,
fact. But yes,
but
but Spider-Man did win,
yes,
but it was spirited and probably closer than anybody thought when Spider-Man came out.
well, but I think when Spider-Man came out, we hadn't seen a lot of these other films.
Yeah,
There was also a huge push for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
there
which
actually was, which
which I think might surprise people the most. Um, and whereas, I when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, when we saw it, I basically said, well, if Spider-Man hadn't come out, this very well could have been my vote. Um, it wouldn't have been, um, but it was like one of my top five animated films of the year. So,
yeah,
uh,
I think the most surprising thing to come out of that discussion before we move on is the fact that we all agreed that the weirdest thing we said was the Miyazaki film is the worst one in the group.
and I don't know that I completely agree with that, but I don't completely not agree with that.
Right?
I
Yeah.
might it,
Again, we're not saying it is bad at all. It's
I get,
just
yeah.
it's just weird
Maybe it's hard for me to say
to hear
that.
the word bad or worst and Miyazaki in
Yeah,
the same sentence. Yeah, I know, right?
particularly when it's a movie that I really liked. But if I broke it down, it's possible that it's fourth or fifth. So,
Yeah,
but again, that speaks to the quality
of the
that was
category.
that was
We
out
said
there.
that a lot. We said this is a really strong category a lot yesterday when we did these votes. So yeah. So next up we went to best documentary feature, which was 20 Days in Mariupol about the war in Ukraine, American Symphony about John Baptiste, Beyond Utopia about North Korean asylum seekers, The Mission about a kid wants to go contact the last uncontacted tribe in the world and bring them the word, and still the Michael J. Fox movie, I believe. I think we've got that labeled wrong, but it's the Michael J. Fox documentary, which I saw at Sundance, and I didn't think I was going to be able to. I did the press line and I watched the movie at Sundance. It's a great film. Again, 5 really good documentaries, and there was a lot of talk about a lot of these as well. And we wound up. I'm actually surprised and more surprised about that we chose the second place. What film we chose second, because I didn't have it as 1 or 2. I Still the Michael J. Fox movie. We named that the best documentary.
Yeah,
It's a nostalgia pick. It's a sentimental pick. It's a great documentary.
yeah,
I thought it was a
yeah.
little easy to pick.
Well, maybe, but I mean, you do think about the incorporation of Michael J. Fox's films and how
Yeah,
they weave that into the story. It's not as easy of a documentary to make as you may have thought. I mean, as you may think. I think there was a lot of craft in there and a lot of skill in there. And yeah, I'm sure there's a certain element of sentimentality We're all, I think, or most of us in the room, grew up with Michael J. Fox.
Yep.
And so I think, yeah, I think, but with documentaries, it's difficult because is this the most important documentary? Maybe not. There's arguments for, any film that's taking place during an actual war where
Right.
journalists are, under they're in constant danger and being bombed and whatnot. So 20 Days maybe is the most relevant at the moment. But we're not necessarily doing the best relevant film.
Right. And people look for different things in documentaries. And I, like I said, I my first choice and my argument was for 20 Days of Mariupol.
Which I would have been totally fine if that had won.
Yeah, there's only one on this list that I didn't care for, and I'm not going to name it. But the second place finish was The Mission, which that surprised me. I thought in the face of everything else, I thought that one wouldn't finish that high.
I have a suspicion that this is one of those categories where everybody kind of got together and said, you know what? Yeah, I can support the Michael J. Fox. There was some, the conversation about it was pretty strong, and I think a lot of us were like, I could go with that. And so I think there was only a couple of people who wouldn't go along with that sort of thing, or meant, and they picked The Mission. But I think if you take the Michael J. Fox documentary out, The Mission, that doesn't mean that The Mission would have won, because I don't think it would have. I think that's one of those strange anomalies that, again, that you don't really know the whole story based on, just looking at what happened. Some other categories that's different, but this one I honestly believe that 20 Days of Mariupol probably would have
won if we didn't have still. Maybe, yeah. Best visual effects, which is always fun because then you start arguing about what's a visual effect.
Yeah.
So we had The Creator, Godzilla -1, Guardians Volume 3, Poor Things, which is it wide yet?
Yes.
Okay, and then Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I don't know if animation is a visual effect or not, but that's neither here nor there for the purposes of this discussion. Somewhat surprisingly, we picked Godzilla -1. My argument against that was that the movie was not. It wasn't an effects dependent film.
Correct.
Not to downplay what was there.
Wow, but it's more effects reliant than a lot of the other films that we talked about this year.
Yeah.
It does. It has Godzilla in it.
Right, which is he's an effect. Sorry. Or is he? Sometimes I think he's a man in a suit.
But that was part of the argument. The fact that we're not entirely sure which is which, and I think because we weren't able to really, we couldn't justify giving Godzilla the non-English.
Yeah.
But I think we all really had or most of us, I think, really had we're really kind of beguiled and kind of loved Godzilla -1. I mean, I think, and for some people, there was someone, made the comment about, this was probably the best Godzilla.
Yeah.
Because
somebody made that
people
comment.
and culture and stuff. But the best Godzilla films were always about people and situations where things, so that end was, I think it might be it's a classic Godzilla narrative, and I think that there, again, in this category, I think there was a debate, on performance versus animation versus. I mean, there was all sorts of stuff that dove into on this one, but I think the sentimentality not that Godzilla doesn't deserve it, but I think it's the compromise that happens sometimes when you vote is you end up going for maybe the film that you don't think is the best, but that you have absolutely no issue with winning. And I think that's kind of what happened in this category. Because, I mean, there's no question that Guardians of the Galaxy uses far more effects. And does animation fit into this? And, well, that's a conversation for another time. But
yeah, it is. But Godzilla, so Godzilla beat the creator. Yeah. Great special effects, nearly seamlessly integrated this world. And Poor Things so there was a tie for second place. My argument against Poor Things was that I felt like they shot it in the volume where Disney shoots all of their Marvel shows now. And so it just felt wrong to me. So
I think Poor Things was supposed to feel wrong, and that was part of but again, that's another conversation. It would have been in my list, but I was, perfectly happy with how we voted.
Yep. Then the wonky category for all the film wonks out there: film editing, best editing. Yeah. Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is where I made an argument that apparently changed Scott's mind.
Yes, and I think it was it's based on the nature of. I mean, your argument was basically, look, you make an animated film. It's not like you can go, okay, that transition doesn't work. Let's go shoot something else. They would have to create something entirely. So yes, the transitions and things in Spider-Man. I think there's more thought that gets put into it, and I think a lot of us hadn't really thought about that.
So I was fairly impressed that argument kind of won him over, which led to Spider-Man winning Best Editing, which is weird when I say is animation a special effect, but then I say you can edit your animation, but it does make sense when you think about it in the terms of you don't shoot sections of animation from 4 different angles and pick the best one in the editing bay. The thing is almost pre-edited, and then it's actually put together at the end. Yeah, so my argument was that it's even more impressive what they managed to do.
Sure, and there inevitably will be things that get cut out.
Right.
More so, in that they will finesse a lot of the transitions and things, and particularly in a film like Spider-Man that is using so many styles. You have to be, seamless. Really.
And then the biggest change you can make is maybe pulling someone in to do some ADR to change a couple lines of dialogue that you don't have to change the animation for. Yeah. So that's nice. So Spider-Man won, but again, we had a tie for second place between The Holdovers and Oppenheimer. And Oppenheimer actually had a really good push at the beginning during the discussion. To win. So I'm not surprised that it finished second. The Holdovers, I'm actually kind of surprised finished second, but I think that's another quirk of the counting.
Yeah, I think that was another one where you had a few people who were very passionate about it.
Yeah.
And by few, I think maybe 2 or 3. I wasn't a huge fan of The Holdovers. I think partially, and this is on me, and we can acknowledge sometimes that the reason why we don't like movies is something that's exclusively just to the person watching it. But I felt like there are I just felt like it wasn't the relationship between teacher and student in that wasn't really as convincing and as compelling as I wanted it to be. I think as someone who's had a pretty close relationship with some of their professors at university and whatnot, it just didn't quite do for me like the story I would tell. So that's on me.
Yeah, it's one of those categories, and that's a film that's not for everyone either. It's not a big blockbuster. It's quiet. and all that. So yeah, but it did finish second with Oppenheimer in editing. So another quasi wonky one, best original score.
Yeah.
Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, which is the first time we will have said this movie, Poor Things, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Scores are important. Everyone wants different things from them. In different films, they perform different functions. And so you have to balance those out. The winner here was Killers of the Flower Moon, which beat out Poor Things. This is a hard category to discuss, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. Are you happy with the result? Was it was Killers your first or second choice?
No, but
it wasn't mine either.
But with that said, I mean, a film I would probably pick wasn't even on the list. So
I wanted the Killer.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's
exactly what I love that soundtrack, that score. Oh my God! If you have not watched that on Netflix, by the way, please go watch that on Netflix.
Well, that's a film that I like that hasn't gotten a lot of publicity for some reason. I really liked The Killer.
Go. I think we talked about that one. Go find our episode on The Killer. We both really did enjoy that. I think a lot more than we expected to. We thought it was. I think we thought it was going to be a fun romp, but
it was, and it's funny because I don't know that. I mean, it's fun in the sense that Fincher's doing Fincher, and messing with you a little bit with what your expectations are. And then, as you will probably hear later, that's something that film critics, we are drawn to films that don't do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
The Killer probably would have been my first pick. If this was sound design, maybe Spider-Man, followed by The Killer would have been my pick.
Yeah.
Of this group, Past Lives is not a very showy soundtrack.
No.
And
that was my argument.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of people who want something that they're going to whistle, or that's going to. Almost sometimes they want a soundtrack that's more memorable than the film, But I think a lot of us were bracing for kind of a landslide for Killers of the Flower Moon, and as you will discover, that landslide actually didn't ever happen, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yep, but there was some seismic shifts in this. I guess this is. I mean, again, this is my second year voting with you, but I guess this is what the UFCA does: is somehow weird things happen and come out of these nominations.
Yeah, every year or something, and this is where the weird stuff comes up in a minute here, but and weird as in just
unexpected,
slightly off the radar, not not things that are completely out of a conversation, but things that maybe aren't considered the front runners. Anyway, I mean, The Killer would have been my choice, so everything else kind of like felt okay. That was
like, I guess.
Yeah,
that's where I was at.
And that's how I tend to feel about the category. Usually I have one or two that I'm really passionate about, and quite a few that was like, well, yeah, that didn't get in the way. So,
another wonky category, but everyone realizes how important it is, but not everyone thinks about it. Cinematography.
Yeah.
Which is weird. So, a gentleman named Rodrigo Prieto is nominated twice in this category for Barbie and Killers of the Flower Moon. Matthew Labatique for Maestro, Hoyt van Hoytema from Oppenheimer, and Robbie Ryan for Poor Things. So how does the film look? How is that composed on camera? How, you think about the director, but the guy looking is the one that's interpreting what the director wants. So we get to this, and we get Robbie Ryan for Poor Things. again, which I felt like was shot in the volume, so I hated it. Well, I didn't hate it. That's a strong word. I didn't care for it. But it beat who I think a lot of people would have guessed the winner, Oppenheimer, just because Nolan's films always look so good.
Yeah, and again, this is one of those categories where, I mean, it's I think I didn't like Killers of the Flower Moon at all, but if you ask me about the cinematography, I would tell you that it's fantastic because it was and it is. And when we have a cinematographer who's nominated for 2 films,
yeah, that's nuts.
It's kind of hard to be like, well, he, maybe that should have gone a little differently, but I thought visually Poor Things did some really interesting stuff. It's definitely in Poor Things, the visuals are part of the film, and in a way that's more what intrusive or more. I mean,
it's definitely more dependent. It's I think a higher percentage of the tone of the film than maybe some other other ones are. So,
but I mean, Oppenheimer, there was some pretty great stuff in Oppenheimer. Certain shots that were non-traditional that were really cool. And I don't know. I mean, I would have been fine with Oppenheimer. I would have been fine with actually pretty much any of these.
Yeah, they were all. I mean, like I said, Poor Things. That's me, but they all look great. And they all do some neat stuff, and
I think this category is a little. I don't know if easier is the thing, but you remember the films that kind of dazzle you.
Yeah.
For one reason or another, and so I think actually cinematography. We don't have it's not as hard to judge as soundtrack, I guess, or score.
Yeah, it is. It's a little easier. Best adapted screenplay. Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Cord Jefferson for American Fiction. Go watch American Fiction. Eric Roth and Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon. Kelly Freeman Craig, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And Tony McNamara, Poor Things. Those are all adapted from previous materials. And in the first weird, I won't say weird, first maybe slightly unexpected result, the winner was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Yes, absolutely. Because you're not rating this against what they're adapting. No. You're rating this as how well did you adapt? How good a film did you make?
Yes.
Or how good a screenplay did you make based on existing materials? And God bless it. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is a great movie. It's really well put together.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, to a certain degree, we've always had a reputation of ignoring what the sure favorite is. And I think it almost comes across as like, I think this year there's some films that we all really, really liked that may not have actually won anything.
Yeah.
And I think Oppenheimer in this category was something that traditionally speaking, I think there will be people who would argue that Oppenheimer, you're taking an entire life, or at least a large section of a person's life, and putting it into a 3-hour movie, and that's never easy.
No, I'm about halfway through the book that he adapted. But speaking of Oppenheimer, it tied with American Fiction for second place. So
and 3 incredibly actually I would go the 3 incredibly different films.
Yes, they're not even
trying to do radically different things.
Yes.
I think the scope of American Fiction and Are You There, God are maybe more similar, but Oppenheimer is definitely a bigger, epic sort of production. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting debate because, I mean, the idea that Oppenheimer took some things that are traditionally kind of boring, and those would be like courtroom scenes and things like that, and made them a little more compelling than they might have been otherwise. There's always kind of I don't know. I'm never 100% happy with even the list that I make for the writing, because a lot of times it's like I just prefer to acknowledge good writing and not try to say, well, what is the best, because that becomes incredibly objective.
Yeah. But on that note, we moved to best original screenplay, not based on existing material or an existing thing. Celine Song for Past Lives, David Hemmingson for The Holdovers, Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach for Barbie, which some people are calling adapted. Even though it's based on a toy, but there's no Barbie book. So we went original.
And I would argue that this is not based on. This is not a Barbie movie that's based on any of the other Barbie movies.
Right.
It's a weird sort of thing, and I see the argument, for the other side of it as well. But
but the other two were for Anatomy of a Fall and December. This is weird because I only really liked a couple that I thought were like standouts in this category. And so Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach finished second for Barbie, behind Celine Song for Past Lives. You'll note that's the second time we've said that name, because it's just a very well constructed script. The story, it is what it is. I believe at some point I said it's as big as it needs to be. It's as small as it needs to be. It's as quiet as it needs to be. It's just very well put together, and it's doing something completely different than what Barbie is doing. I'm not saying that's why it won. They're those are two distinct things.
Yeah, I think the thing that links the two of them is they go against traditional type or form or expectation. I mean, both of those films, I think, did that. It's no secret that I'm a huge fan of Past Lives. I have been since the day I saw it. Mostly because I wasn't expecting what happened, and I wasn't expecting to be emotionally involved in the way that I was, and whatnot. So I wasn't as emotionally involved with Barbie, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the script isn't as good. Again, I prefer to just be in a position where we can say these scripts are great. Go see those movies.
Yeah.
But we're not, and there we are. And the argument about Oppenheimer making courtroom things interesting would probably apply to Anatomy of the Fall as well.
Yeah, that's also true. A lot of courtroom scenes in there. Craziness. Hey everyone, welcome back to season 9 of the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. If you like what you're seeing and hearing, please feel free to like us, share us, follow us wherever you're listening to us, actually. If you're on YouTube, click subscribe. That would be great. Go to the website at vsmoviepodcast.com, and that will give you links to all of our socials. It'll give you write-ups of stuff that's not audio, but you'll get pretty much everything there. So if you like what you're seeing and hearing, make sure you share it with everyone else. Now let's get back to the show. A UFCA unique category. The Vice Martin Award for Performance in a Science Fiction, Fantasy, or Horror Film. Would you care to explain Vice Martin?
Jeff Weiss and Jimmy Martin were critics that were part of the UFCA who passed away while part of the UFCA in kind of surprising. It wasn't an age; it was incidents and sort of things, and both of them were kind of cut from a same cloth. and they were both champions of of science fiction and of horror and some of the movies that typically don't get the right amount of attention. This is a hard category for me. I think some people have never met Jimmy or Jeff approach it in a way that the people that knew them they approach it differently. Um, you know, is the award? Are we awarding the best element of sci-fi horror or whatever of the year, or are we going for the film that they would have voted for? And I think there was some. I think there's a part of it that it's the film that they would have voted for. But what's problematic about that is not everybody knew them.
Right.
So
I had a passing knowledge of Jimmy Martin, not Jeff, and I was hardly close to Jimmy Martin. But I had encountered him on a couple times, and I'd seen him talk about movies. So I at least have that. Some of us don't.
Yeah, and a lot of them.
Yeah. So it's an interesting category. So yeah, so the nominees, Bradley Cooper for Guardians 3 as Rocket, Chris Pine in Dungeons and Dragons, Emma Stone in Poor Things, Iman Vellani in The Marvels, and Nicolas Cage in Renfield, excuse me, who was actually one of my nominees. So you look at how I want to think that the winner and the runner-up are the two most likely picks Jimmy would have made, maybe not in the order. I
think there's you could argue. I don't think Chris Pine would have.
No,
look, Dungeons and Dragons was a fun,
yes,
nostalgic for some of us movie that worked incredibly well and does deserve to be at least if you like fantasy films,
it needs to be appreciated.
You need to go see Dungeons and Dragons, which is something that we didn't say for the last couple Dungeons and Dragons films. So I mean, again, that's a film that we kind of went in going, are they going to do this right? Are they going to mess this up again? And look at that, they did it better than we expected.
Yep.
But yeah, I think ultimately I'm comfortable with how we went, and I think you're probably right on the two choices that we.
Yeah. So Iman Vellani for The Marvels, whom I have loved since the series that everyone else seems to loathe, because I love her energy, I love her spirit, I love that she is Kamala Khan.
I think. I don't know. I would say that's what I think there's a vocal group that doesn't like it.
Yeah,
I think there's a vocal group about anything that has a female cast, a female lead, that they don't like.
That's
and that's very reductive. But if you look at a lot of the people, they have the exact same complaint about every film that features a woman, and they have no issue if that character had been a man.
Right.
Anyway,
runner-up was Nicolas Cage in Renfield, who some of us wanted to nominate also for Dream Scenario, but I didn't. I had to pick. I didn't want to split the Nick Cage vote. I love those two choices. Those would be my top two for this category.
And knowing, I think, yes, I think that both of those fall into a space that's kind of in between best and what would they have chosen. I think they would have been fans of those
two movies
films and would have would have enjoyed them. I think, but I thought, I thought we did okay.
Yeah. Best. Okay, so then we're into the acting categories. Obviously, we're going to wrap this up. Best ensemble cast. How well does your group of people work together? And we had Air, if you remember the Nike movie from way back at the beginning of the year, Barbie, The Holdovers, The Iron Claw, and Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And sure, those are pretty good movies across the board.
And there were a number of other films that probably could have gone into that. I actually liked kind of where this conversation went for this one, because we talked about, in a lot of ensemble films, you still have one or two, actors who are essentially the main force of that ensemble. And you could argue that Zac Efron's character in Iron Claw, that he's a little bit more front and center than everyone else, but I think that movie works only because all of those performances work.
Yep, which is why we won. Which is why we picked that as the winner, the Iron Claw. If you haven't seen the Iron Claw, don't poo-poo it, because it's about wrestling, quote unquote.
It's not really about. Yeah,
it's not really about wrestling. There's wrestling in it, but it's not really about wrestling.
It is about wrestling, but it's not about.
Yeah, it's fabulous in that whole cast together. And then the runner-up, we had the Holdovers, which is really an ensemble of about three.
Yeah.
So that would have been my chief argument against this film, is that it's not. It feels more like a conventional group of people than a more of an ensemble kind of.
Sure, that share.
Yeah,
and they all kind of. I think that's interesting about the Holdovers too, is those three characters, often the interaction is only with one of the other characters. So there's not that many times where you have all three of them.
Right.
Actually together, and so that's kind of another weird quirk of the film. But there were some people who, let's be clear, loved the Holdovers. Absolutely, just loved.
I liked it. I enjoyed the film.
And that's where I am on it. As I did mention that I have some personal issues, but I understand that, again, that,
right.
But I don't really know that it belonged on this list and would have been the second for anyone. I'm a little surprised that actually because there wasn't no one was vocally against Iron Claw.
No.
And I thought there might be some pushback, but there wasn't.
Yeah, that was really fun. It's like we all agree here, right? So let's talk about who we're not.
Yeah.
So, best supporting performance for female. So we had America Ferrera for Barbie, Divine Joy Randolph from The Holdovers, Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer, Rachel McAdams in Are You There, Goddess Me, Margaret, and Sandra Hüller for The Zone of Interest. I almost wish that we didn't have Emily Blunt, that we'd had Florence Pugh for Oppenheimer, if we were going to pick one out of Oppenheimer.
I don't know, because I'm Oppenheimer. But again, is it performance or writing sort of issue?
Yeah,
there's a lot that goes into. I wouldn't disagree with what you said, but I wasn't by any means upset that it was Emily Blunt of the two. And again, this is a category where we're comparing apples to oranges in a lot of cases.
Really are.
And so, but I thought we had a strong list.
We did.
Performances in there.
And so the winner.
And again, this is another one of those lists where I probably would have been okay.
Yeah. The winner was Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers, with Sandra Hüller from The Zone of Interest as the runner-up. So that was an interesting talk, because the Nazi movie won. Best supporting performance for the male: Charles Melton for May December, Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers, Mark Ruffalo, Poor Things, Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer, and Ryan Gosling for Barbie. Oh, look, we've said Barbie again. Yeah. Best supporting actor. So this was kind of a spirited discussion as well. My argument was that the guy that won, if he's not in the film, if he doesn't perform as well as he does, the film doesn't work. Whereas all of the other nominees, that film can recover from a excellent performance by any of those nominees. And so the winner wound up being Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers, partly because there was actually a lot of support for him going in anyway. But this is his first movie.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily like that argument
I
because
don't either. No,
um,
that had no bearing. I mean, you have to acknowledge it. You're like, wow, good job. But
great,
then you look at the
but
performance, you go, wow, good job.
yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, and I'm not gonna, I think with May December, um,
I have issues with that movie.
yeah, I don't.
So
I absolutely love that movie, and but again, I think there were some. I think a lot of us, there were a lot of us who liked it, and a lot of people who were indifferent to it, and I think it was kind of inevitable with some of the passion in the room that Holdovers was going to get some stuff,
yeah,
and I don't really have. Again, I wasn't blown away by that performance, but I also, I guess, I wasn't taken out of the moment. I didn't think it was bad by any stretch of the imagination. So
no,
again, this is kind of an apples to oranges sort of thing, and
it was another strong category, which is great.
yeah, yeah, I'm fine with it. I
Yeah,
don't, I'm not embarrassed by it. I don't know that I would passionately say, "Oh, we got this one absolutely right."
nope.
Well, I know I wouldn't, but anyway.
Yeah. Best lead performance by a male. Andrew Scott, All of Us Strangers. Bradley Cooper for Maestro. Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer. Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. Go watch American Fiction. Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers. Lots of conversation on this one too. Again, it's a pretty strong category.
It is, and they're different performances and different.
Uh,
Yeah.
and there was a second round of balloting on this one,
Yes.
I believe. But the winner came out in a very tight race as Andrew Scott for All of Us Strangers, barely beating Jeffrey Wright from American Fiction. Two great performances that you could easily reverse in terms of
Yeah.
winner and second place.
But I also think this is another category. Well, no, maybe this could have almost gone any direction. I think that there is a lot of love for Oppenheimer. There's a lot of love for Barbie in the room, and I think that you know that they could have almost. I mean, in fact, because this was such a tight category, a lot of it relied on people having to compromise. Is
Yeah,
essentially what happens. It's like, okay, of these last two choices, what would I take?
right.
And those may not have been your top two choices.
Yeah,
But the what we're doing is we go into that room and we're not coming out till we have a decision. And unlike Congress,
right.
we're really not coming out of the room until we have a decision. And so there is an element, and I think we should know that the Salt Lake film critics mostly get along really, really well. I think we're all more so than some other critic groups. There are certain groups where everyone's against each other and can't stand each other, or saying. And I think that we're not that at all. And so sometimes what happens is someone will express a deep passion about something, and and that's why we talk about the films. And Adam really had a love for this movie, and I think I liked a lot of it as well. So when he passionately puts forward a plea, I think, like, okay, I can do. I think that's what
Yeah,
happened to a certain extent here, is that you're like, what, you're not wrong. So
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
comfortable
There
with
was a
that.
lot of "you're not wrong" in here too.
Yeah.
So Andrew Scott barely beats Jeffrey Wright for best lead actor.
And I think,
Bet good.
which was really surprising, actually. That Jeffrey Wright was surprising.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just to hear Jeffrey Wright, but no, you've watched the movie, you're like, oh,
No,
yeah,
and again, not because it's undeserved,
oh,
um,
it is totally
but
deserved.
again, this is a film that American Fiction. There were a lot of people that we discovered that were really passionate about it,
Hmm.
and so yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
which wasn't necessarily expected.
right. Best lead performance by an actress, female. Carey Mulligan in Maestro, Emma Stone in Poor Things, Greta Lee in Past Lives, Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon, and Natalie Portman in May, December. This one really revolved around like two names. And one of them, well, they both made the list, the end of the list. We all agreed that Lily Gladstone was the best part of Killers of the Flower Moon. Whatever anybody thought, whether a person really liked the movie or really didn't like the movie, everyone agreed that Lily Gladstone was the best part of that movie. However, Emma Stone wins for Poor Things because way more people like Poor Things.
Yes.
So Emma Stone wins Poor Things, beating in another tie for second, Greta Lee for Past Lives and Lily Gladstone from Killers of the Flower Moon. This is the first one that I don't like. I hate to say don't like the result. This isn't my preferred result at all.
Sure. But
my choice was second, and it wasn't close. And it's a group award. These aren't Mark's awards. Yeah. So Mark has to live with that.
And there are people on there that, it's hard for me to not vote for Natalie Portman because I've been a Natalie Portman fan for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And her performance was great. But I don't know that I would put it above some. I don't. Again, this is I don't necessarily like awards because it seems you have a winner and everyone else just wasn't good enough, and that's not the case. I think the work that Emma Stone did on Poor Things. She carries that movie. She's the centerpiece. Without her, that film doesn't work. I could argue for it. I could probably argue against it as well, because she's doing a very not necessarily a real person sort of thing. Right. There's a clear this is what this character is, and you need to go and we just need to be a child who develops into and you just have to think about where they are on the development scale.
Right.
I'm fine with it.
It's going to get a lot of love by everyone else too. So, and then, okay, so there's two actual categories left, which is directing and picture. However, there was one other twist we threw in this year, because of a lot of talk about gender specific categories and under gendered categories. We came up with a category, best overall performance. So we took our four winners, best, and best supporting, and we threw them all in a bucket. And we voted to see because sometimes the best performance of the year can come from a supporting actor or actress, supporting character. So obviously that's
not where this one went, though. I would argue.
Yeah. So we threw in Andrew Scott, Emma Stone, Dominic Sessa, and Devon Joy Randolph. And out of those, Emma Stone won for best overall performance, and Devon Joy Randolph was finished second. So the two ladies put in the best. We decided had the best performances of the year overall.
Because there were people who were incredibly passionate about those two films.
Yeah.
And whereas I think a lot of the rest of us didn't necessarily feel like their first choice was represented or was there maybe.
Right.
Necessarily.
Next year I'm going to suggest that we add the winner of the Vice Martin.
Sure. Or what? I don't know. I mean, yeah.
So so it was a different category. We mixed it up. We kind of compared all the apples to apples, and then we compared the apples to oranges, and that's what we came up with. So let us know what you think about those, if you want. Last two, achievement in directing. Celine Song for Past Lives, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Greta Gerwig for Barbie, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, and Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things. In a move that will surprise if you've been paying attention, will surprise everyone. Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things did not win.
No.
Shockingly, probably for some people.
Well, I can tell you why.
Because it's because Celine Song for Past Lives did a better job.
Well, and I think also, yes, and I think we're in a situation here where even the people who loved Poor Things, the majority of them still thought Past Lives was a better movie, and maybe not necessarily, performance. Again, this is a film that relies heavily on the artistic vision of the director, who also was the writer.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of things that kind of get factored into it. It's not necessarily the person who directed the most,
right.
Which would not be. In fact, this might be the director who directed the least, if you want to, or had, or whatnot. Anyway, but I think that's the thing. I think the key was that there's a lot of films that Poor Things. I think a lot of people really liked it, but I think that they all had to acknowledge that, or for the not all, but for the most part, had to acknowledge that Past Lives was actually a better movie.
Yep.
And if there was a film that we all could kind of agree on, that no one really had anything tremendously negative to say,
yep,
Past Lives was that film.
That was I think my closing argument when we went to Best Picture. Was The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, and Poor Things. My argument was that you can pick at any of those other four movies, but you can't really find anything to pick at on Past Lives. Yeah. It's just not there. It is just not there. And it had it had the best screenplay and the best director, and you can't find anything to take it down for.
No. Because the performances, while maybe not stand out, are good.
Yeah.
The cinematography, while maybe not stand out, really good.
Yeah.
The editing, while maybe not a standout,
really good.
Tight.
Yeah.
This movie is, there really isn't going to be an argument of you could cut this.
No, there's no fat on that movie.
A lot of the other films, you could. You could make an argument that this could have been, edited better. So that's, I mean, I think Poor Things had a lot of support, but I think also there was, we weren't so enraptured with the what looked like could have been a landslide at the end of the day, because it kind of felt like it could have been.
Yeah.
But it didn't turn out to be that way.
Nope.
And I think anyway.
So Past Lives wins Best Picture, and Poor Things finishes in second. I'm okay with that. Again, it's not my second choice, but I think once it was clear that Past Lives as an end result is just so good, it just could not be there. It just you couldn't not put it as the Best Picture. And it's nice when that happens and everyone kind of looks at each other and goes, yeah, but I can't really argue. Yeah, you can argue, but you'd be doing it half-heartedly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film that goes against convention. It's a film that is a romantic drama that puts the audience and the characters, to a certain extent, in a position that you feel like you need to choose a person over another person, and what you're supposed to do based on tradition.
Yep.
But you also have to consider and acknowledge that maybe that's not actually the best way to go about looking at relationships.
Yep, absolutely.
So and I think that was also in Robot Dreams. There's certain things that you see in other movies. Well, this had a lot more. I think interesting things than some of the other films did.
Yeah, it's just so solid from top to bottom.
But I think we should point out, Barbie was not a big winner.
Nope. Oppenheimer was not a big winner.
And I think that you could argue that both, or that all of us, if not most of us, would recommend those two films over other films that did actually win in certain categories. There was a lot of love for Barbie. There was a lot of love for Oppenheimer. There's a few detractors for Oppenheimer. But I think Barbie could have in a different year maybe taken some awards that it just didn't get this year. So I've learned to live with that, but I do think that people will look at it and say, oh gosh, well, they didn't like this movie or this, they didn't like the movies that they were supposed to like. And well, yeah, we sometimes go against what seems to be the obvious choice, but we did like.
Yeah, it's not that I don't think that as a group we hated any of the. Obviously, we didn't hate any of these movies.
No, and again, going back to who had the most nominations going in,
Oppenheimer,
those films, Killers of the Flower Moon, and I think Barbie were the top three.
Yeah,
Oppenheimer,
Holdovers, Killers, Barbie, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things.
And yeah, so obviously there was a lot of us who nominated those films, and who enjoyed those films and liked those films. It just didn't turn out to be the people that we are.
It just didn't translate at the end. Ballot math, baby, ballot math. So there you go. So that Utah Film Critics Association Awards for 2023. That's how we're kicking off 2024 here at the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. We're already seeing movies that we will be talking about. Sundance is coming up at the end of this month. Ryan and I are going to talk about that.
We saw a movie that we don't want to talk about.
But for different reasons. So yeah, we won't talk about that. I don't know. We're going to talk about the one we're seeing Tuesday. Probably for different reasons. But yeah, I'll definitely want to talk about it too. It will be a rant or rave, one of the two, I think, is what's going to happen after Tuesday night. So we'll see how that goes. But stick with us. We're back. This is season 9 of the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. We're going to try to be a little more regular for you. Hopefully the business is back to being more regular. Hopefully we're out of all this. Hopefully the strike didn't screw up too much. But we're going to be talking about all of these movies. We're going to talk about some TV shows. And we'll be talking about things like Sundance, FanX later this year, as we always do. So stick with us. And until we talk to you again, I'm Mark. That's Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
Hey, friend.
And we'll talk to you all later.